Okay, so in this video, I'm going to actually show you a couple things that you want to keep in mind if you have a floating tremolo bridge on your guitar. That is not just a whammy bar. All whammy bars will go down like that toward the body. A floating one, you'll notice when I pull the bar up, also goes in a little bit toward the body. Depending on the tension of your strings, they don't all go in. So if you have like a Fender Stratocaster, it's very likely you do not have a floating trem. But if you do, there's a few things you want to keep in mind in general about the setup overall of your strings. I decided to make this video right now because I'm actually changing the strings on this guitar, and this is probably the most common situation that you're going to have to deal with when you do have a floating tremolo equipped instrument. So today, the first thing I'm going to go over is changing the strings. When you change your strings, just time to take off these strings. Maybe you break one, maybe it's time to you know, just they're old maybe. Start with one string, and in fact start with the sixth string. A lot of the time people like to take all their strings off. Don't do that if you have a Floyd Rose. That's going to just completely screw up the balance of the strings and the springs that are on the inside cavity pulling back on the bridge in the other direction. That's how we keep this nice and level. The edge of the body, or I mean the edge of the plate here, should be level with the body. That's a very high priority when you have a floating tremolo bridge. That's how it's designed to work, so that the bar can be at the correct height and angle, and so all that stuff is kept intact with a very fine balance. If you take all your strings off, those springs in the back are going to tug this thing all the way back into the cavity here, and you're going to have to try to recreate that balance, and it's much more of a headache. So take off your sixth string first, because basically this one's doing most of the heavy lifting. If you compare it to the amount of tension that these other strings are designed to be able to handle, this is definitely the string that can handle the most. So these are just some old strings. I've actually already changed the sixth and fifth string in that order because for that very reason. They can handle most of the heavy lifting. So as you go through and change each string, well, here's one other thing. This is really whether you have a Floyd Rose or not. Even a fixed bridge has this situation. When you first put on new strings, if you just start playing on them as soon as you tune up, you'll notice that you keep going out of tune for a while. So when you do put on your strings, this is something I do with two hands usually, but I just basically go down the length of the string, and I pull with my fingers and push with my thumb, and I give the string just a real good beating. And it needs this because otherwise you're just going to keep going out of tune for a while, and it's going to be really frustrating. Give it that first good stretch all the way along its length. Really just give it, start with the sixth string and, be kind of rough with it. Feel free to stretch the hell out of it because it's going to need it. Otherwise, you're just going to do it gradually and keep going flat over time as it adjusts from its unstretched state from the factory. Do this. I've already pretty much done this, but it's probably already gone flat a little bit. Let's see. This is a C sharp standard, so yep, it still had some room. And then, alright, so what I had already done is actually I took off the sixth string and I replaced it, tuned it up to C sharp to match that string, because I left it all in its tuning, and then I tuned it, once I tuned it to C sharp, then I stretched the crap out of it, and then tuned it back up to C sharp, because I want to maintain what was the tension of the previous string setup, because I'm not changing my tuning or anything. I'm just keeping it, this guitar just stays in C sharp all the time. So I've done that with the sixth string, and then I did the same thing with my F sharp string in this case, normally the A string. I tuned it all the way up to the F sharp, then stretched it, and then I tuned it back up to the F sharp because clearly it will lose some of that and need to be tuned even higher. And I'm going to do that with all of them. The last thing, okay, once I have all my strings replaced, I'm not going to do that whole video of this, but what I'm going to do is when I tune it, this is something that whenever you have your Floyd Rose set up, if you've ever tried to just tune it like you normally would, sixth string, fifth string, fourth string, the way we all learn how to tune it in the beginning, the fifth fret, or if you tune to harmonics, which you got to be careful with, but as long as you're doing to the fifth and seventh fret only, don't do that fourth and fifth fret one. Generally, you'll end up finding you keep doing it back and forth, and eventually your bridge is either sticking way up and the whammy bar is like almost flat down, or it's sticking way up off the guitar like that. Here's how to avoid that. You tune from the outside in. Okay? And there's another trick to that, by the way, too. let's say if this guitar was just a little bit flat, it might even be, but let's say the C sharp needs to come up to C sharp. Maybe the whole thing's in tune with itself, but it's like a quarter tone below. So let's say I need to tune this up to C sharp. What I would actually do is tune this up higher than C sharp, because when I change this string, all right, when I go further than it, and then I start working on the other 5 strings, and they start picking up some of the lifting, this string is going to be, some of the tension is going to be released from it, because these other 5 are going to pick up some of that, and it's going to go back down in pitch. So when I tune it up, I want to overcompensate a little bit. Go past the tone that you're trying to tune to on the outside strings, and you do this the most for the outside. So both of these I would tune, maybe depending on how flat I am, I might even go as far as a half step past the note. So instead of C sharp, I'd tune all the way to D on both of these strings, because then when I tune to this F sharp, I'm actually going to go not all the way to G. I'm definitely not going to go a half step past it there, but a little less, maybe just a few cents less, you know. And then as I get to the D string, still going a little bit hair sharp, you know, at least a hair sharp. By the time I get to the 3rd string, I can pretty much tune that as I would want to tune it, exactly to the note, because by that time the other 5 strings should have adjusted. You're still going to have to go through your set of strings at least 2 more times. Okay, so that's part of the trade-off of having a really badass bridge on your guitar, is that you have to spend a little bit more time setting it up and tuning it. But then you have an amazing new world of different things that you can do with phrasing. So it's a trade-off, and it's totally worth it. But this is just deal with it. Sorry, it comes with having a Floyd Rose. So that's just something to keep in mind. Again, tune from the outside in, and overcompensate if you're too flat. So you'll tune sharper than you mean to go. Or if you're tuning down, then you go flatter than you mean to, because the other strings are going to start picking up the slack. As soon as you tune this string down, you know, in fact, as you take your first string off, just to change your strings, and you strum the other 5, if you have a Floyd Rose, you'll notice that the rest of your guitar just went totally out of tune. It sounds horrible. That's what's going on every time you tighten or loosen a tuning peg. Okay, so that is it for today. Keep that in mind whenever you're doing anything that adjusts the tension on the strings versus springs, that very delicate balance going on right at that little pivot point. So I'm Jason with Shred Mentor Rock Guitar Academy. You can find us at shredmentor.com, and I'll see you next time.